And we're going to
Sure.
continue on with the conversation now that we're actually live and producing content. You're welcome, Duvid. But I'm saying, hey guys, what's going on? Memes here, and I'm joined by the lovely Jennifer Scharf here from the Church of Entropy YouTube channel. And we're going to be working on a derivation for what is colloquially, at least at the moment, called eternal cyclic cosmology. Essentially, we're taking the concept from Sir Roger Penrose, and I do remember in some of the videos and some of the talks he's had, he's like, in order for this to happen, and you basically see that kind of one-way direction, and you're like, okay, maybe, but how do we? But then all of a sudden you get the, well, look, the HF8 complement there. I'm like, okay, you can get to that point where you're going over, because they always show it closing, and it goes through and it twists and then it opens up again. Because on all those universe diagrams, you see it expanding. I'm like, isn't it just flat? Because space-time looks very flat, and that seems very
It's
surprising.
non-local. It's non-local. That's where it's a bit messy, right? It's not non-local. So that thing it looks like it has a location, right? Like you could maybe hold it in your hand, but no. It's like the sphere. It's non-local. So all that means is that the potential for a sphere and this object as well is equal everywhere. There's no greater probability of a sphere anywhere. No region is privileged with regards to manifestation of these forms. They're equally likely everywhere, if you will. But they're pre-spatial, and that's the really key thing. And I think the way we can express this is, why is the Heisenberg uncertainty principle a thing? Why is quantum state exclusion a thing? Because matter has a maximum density. What corresponds to the maximum density is the measurement limit. So to say that two fermions can't be in the same quantum state simultaneously, and to say that the measurement limit exists, technically that's the same information. So the way we interpret this numerology here is we say the HF8, not the complement, the hyperbolic figure 8 not. What does that represent?
It's the action.
The measurement limit itself. We can't reach the measurement limit because can't put two fermions in the same quantum state, but we can do everything else. That's why everything except the not is permissible. What do you think of that?
I think we need to get Kaylee in there, because I was totally listening to her video. I'm looking at that, and then again, maybe it's just one of those things. Maybe I'm biased. I'm totally biased. When I notice you there, Kai. Welcome, my friend. But anytime I see a video and I see the 7 circles and the circle, I take notice. Thank you, Jen.
But, well, you're very welcome, but I hope that you understand how to read that, because just because someone uses a compelling diagram doesn't mean that it's reflective of reality. So that one circle with 6 circles around it.
It was the third video I kind of got into after I watched the first 2 on manifolds, which coincidentally looked a little similar to this. I'm just, and again, when I see a lot of smart people and they're saying things, and then I'm just like, okay, there's one thing I learned from Sam Harris. It's like, all right, a lot of times people just have a lack of information. If you're just missing this one thing, because there's a bajillion different things out there, I'm like, okay, now we have the internet. Now we're connected. Now you need to sift through it all, because you'll get a crazy person like me, and it's like, I'll spout complete nonsense. And then occasionally a crazy person can be right. And the thing is, it's hard to tell. So we're attempting to actually do some more of a formalization and perhaps actually publish a paper. Put something out there. Get it into the general lexicon. And even if it's just on the archive, if somebody has a similar idea, maybe like, oh my God, I have this data. This data will fit to this model. And I tend to think this might be one of the geometric setups that Sir Roger Penrose was kind of describing. He's like, you would need this geometry, you need to have all these basically things that he didn't have. Now that I think about it, perhaps he should have them. Jen, why don't you walk us through this article?
Are you saying he should have known this?
No. What I'm saying is, I think he has an assistant. I might be able to send his assistant something. Continue.
Oh, you're talking about Sir Roger Penrose.
I'm just saying that I look at what's going on in the world, and I would like to attempt to make it a better place. And if we can get a lot of people excited about this is the thing. Yeah. It's like I'm but a dreamer and a memer of dreams. If that happens to be my talent set, I'm totally happy with that. I can live with this. So we're talking about the existential orders and the forms. This is metaphysics too, from the Church of Entropy.
I got a new way of explaining it. Okay. So think of it rather than things being at rest and accelerated, think of them as being going infinitely fast and slowing down. So I'm thinking
that makes more sense to me than it probably should, but continue.
How do we account for the non-localization of a localized form? Well, it's entanglement. Entanglement's a principle that applies over all the scales, and same with measurement limit. That applies on all the scales. And how do we evidence this? Well, this very form here. We say, well, we can go from this to animal and from this to mushroom in a series of steps that may not be continuous in the classical sense. Why would it need to be? But it certainly follows. One follows from the other in a fully justified manner. So what I've tried to illustrate in this diagram here, and I don't know if I'm doing a good job, putting the going infinitely fast and gradually slowing down idea on the back burner for a moment. The idea is somewhat reminiscent of Platonism, where unseen geometries are animating what is accessible to our senses, which would be the fourth perceptual level. So this is where it's really hard. And you get these questions like, where's the color? Like, at what point does it become the color red? Is the color red that I see the same as yours, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Within the way that's currently framed, it may be hard to get out of the way of the built-in suppositions to the way those, because sometimes just the phrasing is suppositional.
Right. Well, I mean,
so I'm saying
that's politics 101. Depending on how you phrase a question, I mean, people will very often answer very differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's fine for what it is. But when we're doing this stuff, we want to completely, we want to divide that out, essentially. We want to not have that influence within what we're doing.
This is the beautiful thing with things like the Wolfram language and stuff like that, because we've got folks like Stephen and Team Wolfram, who for the past 30, 40 years have been developing a computational language. And this is the thing that I noticed. And like different folks will come by and it's just, he'd say things very simply, but the level of accuracy tends to be quite high. I appreciate that. And I do think with modern technology, we can basically parse that out. Because like I had friends that were partially colorblind. So at least from what they described to me, my red that kind of looks like this right now would have been quite different to them. So if we can actually account for that, now we can, I don't know, engage in science, minimize the potential errors and everything. So you were talking about basically the way I see it here is I just look at it from an anime perspective. If Guy's still here, he might appreciate this. It's like, here's what's perceived. We'll start from the other end. This is my perceptual form. Call it a Saiyan. This is what is reduced when we're at where we are. If you start vibrating, and basically you're looking at what is the easiest path. At least actually.
Would I be able to share something right now? Because I think this self-vibration of the boundary is not self-evident the way I've presented it there. And I've made an additional diagram. Is that okay?
Okay, yeah.
I'm sorry if I didn't mean to cut you off halfway.
No, by all means. I'm just saying these are basically different states. Essentially what you got for is, as far as we've been able to arrive, or at least Thad seems to have been kind of working on this for something like 20-something years, and just playing on Wolfram Alpha, it's like, oh, look, there happens to be a geometric component. It happens to be the simplest balanced manifold. Well, it's a 3 manifold, but it can also fit into 4 space as well. That's very interesting. What's he using for the mathematical properties? Well, he's using the asymmetric Clifford torus, which if you start watching some of the videos on that, it happens to be a toroidal shape that can also fit in 2-dimensional space. And basically says this HFA.
Hold on a minute. What do you mean 2-dimensional space? Do you mean that it is itself a 2-dimensional surface embedded within a 3-dimensional manifold?
Well, no, it's a 3-dimensional thing that can fit in 2 space because of the way it basically rotates. It has a similar form of action. from the way I see it, basically that's two circles. So basically, you could take the two circles, and then you're combining. It's basically rotational. Hold on, I'll get the.
Okay, just hang on. As far as I understand it, just for the audience who may not know, torus is a circle rotated around a line, but the circle doesn't intersect the line, or maybe intersects it like at a point. That's the general shape. I don't know if that's actually how a torus is animated, but that's a very simple.
It's a donut. A
donut, basically.
Donut. Yeah, it's the donut theory. It's my friend Yvette. She's a physicist. She asked me. She's like, "Is it the donut thing?" I'm like, "A torus." I'm like, and I'm thinking. I'm
Right.
like, "Oh yeah, no. I mean, it is. It is."
So how do you want to look at that shape as a composite of basic forms, right? So every one of the basic forms has a formation energy. And so how do we form a torus from the basic forms? Line and circle is the minimum that you need, right?
Oh, I'm getting your thing now. Okay, that's making
line and circle. And what else? What else do we need? We need a line, a circle, and
we need a twist.
A rotation operator. You want however you want to word that, but you understand what I mean.
Okay.
We have to set it up, and then we have to set the circle in rotation around the line. Fair enough? So that represents three things in some sense. And the idea is that the universe minimizes the number of things that it does to a system.
Because it's the simplest universe.
We already have this proof through entropy. It's just a matter of a better interpretation of entropy and say, let's use this dimensional redundancy to our computational advantage. And we don't know how to parameterize the system, but we know the system admits a finite parameterization with infinite objects. And here's one of them. All right, so what is this? It's like a circle divided into itself, kind of.
Right. It's going through a twisting action.
Dude, I'm sorry, but can you actually just not put that for too long? I'm getting emotional.
Yeah. No, it's starting to bother me too. But the viewership went up, so okay. Yeah, no, I'll stop that. We'll go back to the other thing. You said, okay, I have your thing. There we go. Ooh.
Okay, so you got your pure form, which is the non-dual measurement limit pure form is the hyperbolic figure 8 knot complement. Yeah. Why? Essentially because of quantum state exclusion, right? Every state's permissible except
two fermions being together.
Which is represented geometrically with?
They go different ways.
The HF8. Okay, remember, what's special about HF8?
Well, it's balanced and it's closed.
It has 4 somethings in it. It's the 3 + 1 dimensional limit point. It's the smallest way to go to 4. And you can see that by looking at the hyperbolic figure 8 knot wiki. If anyone's interested, you'll see 3 generating functions, which are all x, y, z, or f of t, I think. Anyway, it's important energetically, and that's why you can get all these cool effects from it, and why it goes into the counting system, because we want to meaningfully incorporate infinity. And how do we do that? Well, we just have our mathematical structures reflect what actual infinity is. So you have your form, which is, you think of it as going infinitely fast. But can you understand or speculate why an infinitely fast, starting with infinite speed, would be beneficial for a model?
Because now you're at the limit.
Starting at the limit point. Why might that be beneficial?
Because now you can basically attempt to analyze everything, right? Because you go from one asymptote to the other.
Which is more complicated to understand for a beginner, the hyperbolic knot or the complement of the knot?
That's a good question.
That which is not the knot is that which is. But
it's not
the knot is far simpler to understand than the complement of the knot. I mean, you look up that complement, it's almost nowhere on the internet.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, well, the interesting thing is, and actually, we'll pop over to the. Sorry, Jen.
So what we want is an intuitive way to go from the limit point to the circumstances that we want to model in science. And the question is, like, how do we model the limit point? Given that we can't really conceive of the limit point, how do we model it such that we don't lose resolution upon computation?
What did I go? No, I went over something and it was just rotating. I don't know what I went over. It was beautiful.
So think about it. What does it take? Go back to the beginning. What does it take to build this?
I know it's in your article.
Structurally, we need
you need a line.
No, what would we start? What would we start with to build a knot? What would make sense to start?
I mean, you do a circle.
Why does it make sense to start with a circle rather than a line?
Because a circle has a form of balance. It's geometrically the smallest thing for the amount of radius.
I fucking love that. I love that. I fucking love math, unironically. It's great.
You need to play on Wolfram Alpha. This is the thing. You're like, I'm like, okay. Knows it, because Thad was the same way. Thad's like, it's like, I'm not a math guy, I'm a physicist. And it's like, all of a sudden he started playing, looks at the relationships. And the thing is, math turned me off for so many reasons, just because it seemed so boring until we really got into it. And now it's like, even Dr. Wolfram, he's like, yeah, math, I really was a big fan, because I'm like, well, I have computers for this. And a lot of my life, I'm like, well, eventually there'll be some computer or program, but a lot of times I didn't know how to use it. Now it's like, wait, I can go on this and ask, like, in generalized English to see things and then see how the operations work. It's very interesting. Makes
you can easier. Literally tie up a piece of rope in this configuration.
Yep.
So you can 3D print the complement of the figure 8 knot, and those interested, there's a link on my latest blog post to such a video. But you can't easily demonstrate the figure 8 knot complement.
At least for me in my nature. Google, when I type in the hyperbolic figure 8 knot, the first video that will come up is Professor Henry Segerman's video, and he has a shapeways thing over there. And it's a very beautiful thing. It ain't cheap, but it's custom 3D printed.
Can you put a price on that level of paramacrocanonical self-transcendence? Just kidding. Oh, there you go. That's what I was talking about. See, go. Can you just scroll up real quick?
Yep.
I mean, not to get so excited over equations, but like, let's be real. Just a little more scroll up. I think it's higher up. It's the one where they're all f of t. Yeah, there you go. X. See how x is x of t?
Wait. Oh, x, y, z. We often use those to actually model things in.
And yeah, people
a multi-plane graph. Oh, look, there's t. That's just another variable there.
People are going to want to use the Wolfram stuff if they can understand how it applies to their own intuitions, and this is how to get it. The concepts to join up to your intuitions is to count the number of variables versus the number of equations. So we haven't even got to the shape that predicts the mushroom and stuff. We're still in pure mathematical abstraction here. What is important to note about the parameter form of this knot?
So as long as we can account for the different stuff and things, we can
you want to say that there's 3 variables.
Okay.
So it's in what? R.
That's our.
It's in R3. Look at this. Look at the vector.
Yes,
simple. Just read. I'm not trying to trip you up here, but you got to follow. You got to follow logic here. A simple parametric representation is this.
But is the knot itself not in 4 space, or no? It's 3.
Hold on. Okay. Stop scrolling around, please. Motion sickness.
I apologize.
It's fine, but you got to follow. So just look at broad strokes here. How many variables? Jesus, you're on the wrong equation,
4.
dude. Go up.
Wait, this one?
It's just the first one. Literally the simplest
F,
one.
X, Y, Z, E?
A simple parametric representation is yes.
Okay.
So that's R3. How many variables are there?
It's got 5 total. It's got, okay, no, it's got 4 and a constant.
It's got 4. Okay, where's the constant?
I thought that was F.
Where does it say F?
It says F right there. It's F of X, Y, Z. Am I?
Okay, again, you're on the wrong equations.
Okay, that's why I asked if it was that one.
You want to go to the
Yeah, you're
first
talking about the sines
equations
and cosines.
after description. Yeah.
Okay.
So how many equations?
It's got 3.
How many unknowns?
3.
No.
Oh, wait. It's got T. It's got
Just
4.
count them. 3 equations, 4 unknowns. What does that mean?
It's confusing.
It's confusing. It means we can't isolate a point, right? So if we want to isolate a point in a space, we need as many equations as unknowns, right? We don't have that here. It's not just that we need as many equations as unknowns. It's more stringent than that. We need as many linearly independent equations as unknowns. You see the difference? No?
No, I want you to tell me that 7 has nothing to do with anything here. It just happens to be.
You really want me to say like as if I would sign off on that? First of all,
I know.
no
That's a terrible thing, because if that actually did emerge,
I'm not used to working in base 10. Forgive me, I'm really not. I'm used to base 4. It's really hard to get out of base 4.
4 is pretty good. 4 is pretty good.
You know what? Let's put a pin in that, because that's interesting.
Yeah,
7 maybe something to do with the parametric.
We need to get to the cosmology, Jen. I'm sorry, we've been going for like 20-something minutes. Are you serious? We're still in metaphysics. Okay.
Look,
how do we get to the universe? That's what the people clicked on.
Here, no, this is what's important. This boundary condition is what's super important. Sure. Okay, we're going from 3 equations, 4 unknowns.
Okay.
What is that? We're in 3 space, but it's a model of 3 plus 1D. You see what I mean?
Oh, okay.
So we're not going to be able to visualize 4D. We don't have to. We don't even have 4D worth of information, because the 3 and the 1 aren't compatible. The temporality has something the spatiality doesn't.
Well, typically people, the way they attempt to do it is via tesseract. Or actually, Jonathan, in some of his work, they were using 4-dimensional, I believe they call them pentahedra or something like that. Basically, he was using a tetrahedra, but it was 4-dimensional. So basically, you just had a tetrahedron and then another tetrahedron in there, and they were using that to model a vector space. And I'm like, it's very intuitive. It's a good idea.
I have to be careful that's our conceptualization. Not to get carried away with our intuitions, because our intuitions have a certain notion that doesn't necessarily map to reality. So that's why just sticking with what we're sure about, which is this stuff about we don't know if we can model 4D. We can try, and I certainly laud the efforts of people to try. Tesseracts, etc. It's fascinating stuff, but there's no reason to think that 4D is anything other than 3D. For the same reason hard solipsism is a thing. How's it going, Titan?
Welcome.
So all I'm saying is, numerically versus geometrically, we can get there numerically, but we can't necessarily get there geometrically, and it's fine. We just need to acknowledge that. But this is how we're modeling 3 plus 1D embedded in a 3D space. But is that really what's going on, right? Not quite.
Okay, so what you're saying, to get there, it's like we're running into the measurement limit.
What I'm saying is that this set of equations, in some sense, represents the same thing as the measurement limit or the Pauli exclusion principle.
Basically, the point where we're like, nope.
It's basically saying that the limit is 4. The limit is 4. Oh, don't even go there. But you can think about going there. You can really edge to the end of the fucking universe to go there, but can you go there? No, don't even. Because no. That's why it's just the complement. The limit point, the knot itself, completely inaccessible.
Okay.
That's where we come to this.
But before we go down the wiki hole, you're explaining these points here.
Right.
Basically kind of get to the universe, which...
So did you follow what I said earlier about the analogization of the knot as the measurement limit itself versus the complement of the measurement limit being the permissible states, which exist on a continuum probability a la Boltzmann distribution-esque entity, where the things exist in proportion to their formation energy.
My base thought is, and maybe I was just coming from another perspective, is I thought the complement was leading us to the measurement limit, because it's like, oh, you can't see in here. But then again, at the same point, it's like, okay, that would be what would be generated by the action, and
chicken and egg.
Well, that's the thing. I'm like, to be fair, that actually, in a way, actually makes probably even more sense, because it's like, I'm doing all these things here. It's like, all right, we're doing the minimal things, but these things are happening, and it's like our interest will be like, whoa, or only get what is being emitted from that particular observational point, which, I don't know, it seems to explain things, because it's also in the Planck mass. Why is this a thing? We know the electron still has a little bit of mass. So I'm excited. You're talking about the animated form.
Yeah, so we can't access the pure form. So what's the pure form in this case? It is, well, there's two pure forms. There's the antipure form, which is the hyperbolic figure 8, which gives us the complement, which is actually the pure form. But again, metaphors, you can switch them, right? Like for a while I was using the sphere as the pure form, but I realized that's actually not a great metaphor, because people can't visualize it vibrating. So that's why I'm moving into some more intuitive versions.
Colloquially, some may say you got your yin, you got your yang. It just kind of, that was another discussion. We need to have another point. Ooh.
This is slightly easier. So your basic idea is you're trying to derive the concept of vibration from a different concept, from a more fundamental concept, which is self-repulsion. So why is the pure form not actually something we observe in the material realm? Because that's not the most self-contained, self-reflected, or self-sustaining shape possible. So the way to reason that out is just think of it as, I think we've actually been through this before in talking about the formation of a planet. Like, how do we get to a point where the planet has a constant radius? It's when there's a balance between the repulsion, the electromagnetic repulsion, and the gravitational attraction. Do you remember that? We reasoned that out.
I don't remember that last point, but I'm beginning to think it's of the utmost importance in the universe.
Well, everything is derived from simple boundary condition vibrations. And the best you know, like the better you know the qualities of the vibrating membrane and the order in which they arise, the easier it is to make predictive models. If you don't know the order in which qualities arise, you're going to make a mistake. Like, how are you going to not make a mistake is my question.
Right,
so this way, every step you can actually reason it out. There's a very good reason for everything. So why should the boundary collapse, i.e. start to vibrate, i.e. not have a constant radius? Even though our original reasoning led us to the conclusion that gravitational collapse and electromagnetic self-repulsion eventually reach a balance point of a constant radius.
I'm guessing because it doesn't fall into the principle of least action, thereby the least action would actually be, from our observational standpoint, some form of a movement, even if it's a subtle movement. Good. Because of the electromagnets. Oh!
Good. So the action is the area, in some sense, area over the radius. And what does vibration give us? What does it do to the area?
What's going to make it articulate? We're going to notice
make it bigger, thicker, fatter, without changing the radius. What's the average radius of that versus if that was not moving? It's the same.
Wait, it's going to change the average radius of the density.
I'm sorry. When I say radius, I'm sorry. What I mean by radius here is like that would be the surface of the planet.
Okay.
So if the planet was vibrating like that, the radius wouldn't change because on average.
Oh yeah. Because because there's stuff and things going on. Okay, gotcha.
But its area is longer so that it can make those deformations. Therefore, if the action is area over radius, a vibrating surface has a lower action. than one with a stable surface. And that's why it helps to look at the stable surface as going infinitely fast for two reasons. One, it makes sense because you're slowing down rather than being like, well, where the hell did all this motion come from? Two, it conveys the idea of entanglement, aka superfluid, aka the apparent sizes, lengths on the HF8 are not true lengths because it's a non-local identity. Length emerges from it. We have access geometrically.
I'm still digesting that last part. Sorry to cut you off, Jen. But at the same time, I'm like, I've heard several pretty smart folks say that, and I can grasp it, and I'm slowly accepting it. Maybe it's... See, these things make sense to me. Because, like, oh, mushrooms. I apologize.
This would be the next step of reasoning, where we like the limits of the HF8 are, considerable. They're the only real benefit to the HF8 is conceptual, as well as computational. Algebraically, it's a lot easier. I still haven't seen equations describing this effing thing. Have you?
I've taken a number of those equations that are on Wikipedia, as well as from Math World, like the Wolfram repository, and I've plugged them into Wolfram Alpha. And the closest I've got to them with, at least in my mind, appropriate variables, I exceed my computation time.
Holy shit, that's discouraging.
Like,
hey,
there were certain things.
Example of why hyperbolic geometry is counterintuitive?
Yes.
Which is bigger, R2 or R3?
Depends.
I feel honestly bad for memes. Everybody should love memes for infinity, for having to put up with this. This can't be easy. But can you see what I labeled there on the diagram of R2 being the distance from the stalk to the inner perimeter of the cap? Or inner surface of the cap?
And then it has, okay. Oh, look,
to me, R3 and R2 look to be almost the same size. If not, R3 slightly smaller than R2.
Well, it's from a different vantage point.
I mean,
because
do you agree?
It curls over to the cap. No. I think this is actually supporting your argument, because now we're kind of seeing a boundary point, or a point where there's more transition than, at least if you were to model that, in my opinion, because mushrooms, they kind of curl over there. So I think it's something to do with like catching moisture or something, because they like moist stuff.
You've skipped 20 trillion steps ahead again. We're still trying to get to you understanding how the HF8 complement is the animating potential of the mushroom, and how the surface is not flat of the HF8. It is
right.
Ripply. And why is it ripply? Because the HF8's not flat in reality.
Right. There's curvature.
See these ripples here on the right? Yeah. They correspond to an interference pattern.
Right.
This is an interference pattern, which has a constant density of maxima as you go. So as the thing billows out towards the center, you get more striations. So that's why it has to be done step by step, because you have to really understand why the surface of the HF8 is not flat. So it could become flat, like apples are flat, but intrinsically it's not flat. It is subject to vibration along its boundary. And not just any kind of vibration, as much vibration as the system representing its form will tolerate.
No, you're talking about the ripple thing for the 3D. Okay. See, I'm going back to the ant walking along the ginormous donut, in this case mushroom or something, kind of like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, except like the mushroom is like the size of a plant. So relativistically to us, it might be that way, but I see what you're saying. Okay.
You're overcomplicating it. You're really like, you're going from 1D to 37D. It's like, dude, the universe is only 14D.
I like Dungeons and Dragons. I'll stick to those dice right now. But Okay.
So think about it.
How do
Okay,
we,
again, think about it like this. How fast is the QMPT going?
the quantum, wait, what'd you say?
What is the speed of the QMPT?
I don't know what that is.
It doesn't have a speed, but in the model, we say that it's infinity.
No, I don't know what QMPT means.
Oh, quantum mechanical periodic table.
Oh, that's
there
what
on the
you
screen.
call it. Okay. This is Jen's 3D model of the. I'm just saying that some folks may have not have seen this before.
I'm sorry. I'm going too fast again. Must be my model. But anyway, yes, it's obviously stationary. I'm not claiming that this is actually going infinitely fast, but in the model, that's the easiest way to understand
It's a
it for a
boundary
beginner.
condition.
Yeah, you
What's
just
this?
say that
It's
thing
a
is going infinitely
maximum.
fast. It's
And
not
then
moving, and it's going infinitely
yeah.
fast. And those are the same thing for pre-spatial entities.
Well, I mean, if you figure that stuff out, then you got pretty much everything.
So if I can just run through the logic here, first one's going infinitely fast. Then you fix a line. That's the second. So we create a line. So in the model, that's imposing an energetic constraint on a system. At least one measurement. We could call it a linearization, if you will.
Okay.
So we're slowing it down.
You're adding
infinite?
a thing to it. You're adding a thing, and we're attempting to do minimal thing. Okay. That's a thing.
We're adding a thing to it. So when we say thing and we're talking about math, we can replace thing with boundary because those are our primitives in some sense. As long as you understand that we're working from an object that has to somehow include the measurement limit.
Which would be horribly offended if maybe we call this a brain. I'm just saying if we use certain terminology that's in, and maybe that's not correct. All I know is brain. It is a membrane. I'm just saying if we use some of the lingo, if we can communicate to the string theory folks, all of a sudden in a way, it's like I don't really care what the heck you call it or anything. I'm like, if it moves humanity forward, that sounds like a good thing.
Dude, I thought you fucking said BRAIN, but you said BRANE, right?
What? Oh, yeah.
You said brain as in membrane, right? Not brain as in inside my skull kind of thing?
Well, if we live in hyperbolic reality, either one of those may be true. The exact probability of which that I meant. That's a terrible thing. That's a terrible thing. Depending on how you think about it, it's like, how metaphysical do you want to get? I hear folks talking about the mind of God, and the more and more I look at these different things, I'm like, mind, heart, turtle.
No, bless your soul. That's not the mind of God.
It breaks my brain.
Conceive it. We can't conceive of the mind of God. We don't have access to that, but we can establish its perfection. And I think this is a way to establish the perfection of the God mind while also acknowledging that it's not something perceivable.
I'll take God's Turing machine playing Fortnite. Whatever we get, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing no matter what's happening. And you know what? We're here, so might as well enjoy the ride and see what we can do.
So infinitely fast object, boundary, slowing down, and what would you call it? A clouding or a compression.
Some folks say, I don't necessarily want to say inertia, but at least that's the other thing. The moment of something.
Inertial compression, maybe? That might be a good one.
Well, I mean, that's basically what happens in a vortex and everything. No, and that's actually one of the most important things is because the big thing about that when Stephen Wolfram was yakking on for like about an hour about like, I will call it the hard problem of turbulence. And this is one of those historic things that I think this might make a lot of sense why we kind of got stalled up for a little while, because physics community they got the turbulence. It's like, this is very hard. What the heck's going on? There's all these eddies. There's a lot of stuff to account. It's like, well, we'll say that to the material science people. The engineers can figure that out. We're going to continue to work on the stuff that we know we can figure out and stuff. And that kind of got punted, and it's like, all right, well, aside from large-scale hydro dams and stuff like that, are you really utilizing this? Are you really trying to figure this out on a fairly frequent and regular basis? It's very hard. However, vortices are one of those things that they tend to persist. And that's one of the big things. And especially if... Okay.
Generate a vortex from this then. How do I get a vortex?
If I spin it, it's going to make a vortex.
Well, is that a vortex on the right?
Yeah.
So imposing a single line on the QMPT creates a vortex. Is there anything simpler than a single line?
A point.
Oh.
I'm...
You did it!
Oh.
You got the right answer!
Oh, I did it without even the picture.
Somebody got a metaphysical question right on the first try.
No, I read your article. I'm like, okay, it's there for a reason, but you're kind of skipping it a little bit over. Okay, so I think this is what they colloquially within the internet sphere have been referring to as what's his name's the Janus point. Here's where this thing happens. Again, I haven't read his book. Professor Keating had him on. He was a very pleasant gentleman. I believe he was a cosmologist. But I'm like, okay, I hear all these things. People are saying these things. This person has this particular piece of information. I'm like a lot of these folks are right or right on the right trail. And I'm like, it helps when you literally have the official strategy guide to physics. I got those strategy guides for Breath of Fire 2. It was a beautiful thing. It had some amazing artwork. Another contributing reason why I'm probably a furry.
Okay, Mr. Furry, if we fix a point,
Scaly,
what happens? Okay, Scaly boy, what happens? What happens if we fix a point? Well, first of all, first of all, what point are we going to fix?
See, for this, it's harder because that's technically hydrogen, although that is a...
Don't think of it as hydrogen. Think of it as a pure form. Just think of it as a general thing. The very center. And what do we get? Yeah. What does that give us? We fix that point. What do we get?
Blank line.
Nothing else is fixed. If nothing else is fixed and we have a point fixed,
then everything else that's going at its max.
What is it?
The moment of inertia.
Well, is it what is the resulting shape?
Let me get your vortex.
Although for vortex,
there needs to at a vortex there would need to be a twist.
Remember, it's starting from infinity. It's starting from infinitely fast. It has all motion. Why do we model it as having all motion initially? Because light is completely unbounded in its potential. Light is unbounded, but for its relations with mass. So it makes perfect sense to model something as going infinitely fast. So yeah, you already have access to infinite motion from the get-go. The trick is visualizing something going infinitely fast and slowing it down to something visible.
Johnny, I cannot condone any type of entheogens here. You may need another beer. I am not a doctor or your bartender. Don't drive.
You either need to stop drinking right now or start drinking really fucking fast. It's one or the other. Okay, what do you think? If we fix a point, remember the QMPT has infinite motion, and we fix a point in the middle, what's the resulting shape? Honestly, I don't even care what you say. I don't even care what you say. I just want to know what you think the answer is.
It's okay. Based upon what you just said over basically the past about 30 minutes, Jen, I'm trying to visualize a thing. What's the simplest thing for? It's kind of infinite motion and everything. If it has a center line, if it's rotating, all of a sudden you immediately hit the brakes. What the heck happens? You're going to kind of get some form of a split end. Actually, now that actually does make sense. And no, because initially I'm thinking sphere, but if I put the brakes on, they're both going to be going the same way. But then at the point, I'm like, all right, if I'm going to apply some form of Pauli exclusion principle, they're going to end up having to differentiate in a way. So would there be an entanglement repulsion there? Or the easiest way is if you have all the articulations going on there at that same time. I mean, it's rather probabilistic, in my opinion, that you get two things going the separate way.
Wow, that was way better than it. Oh my god, that was way better. I thought you were just going to be like sphere or hyperbolic figure eight, but you actually gave a nuanced answer. Nice. And I was going to say, I think it actually depends how fast it's going. It'll either resolve as a sphere or as a HFA complement.
No. The only way I was able to get this is because the way you've generated these models, as far as I can tell, that I don't fully understand, but if you're taking the limits, the one thing that I got out from basically algebra or anything is once we start doing asymptotes, it's like, all right, this line will continue to go all the way up, eventually to infinity, and then this point over here will go all the way down and eventually to infinity. And that was the one thing I really grasped on. That's very interesting. That sounds useful. And doodling and other things that kind of bored me at the time. But that's the type of thing I understand because, well, just from gaming, min-maxing. What am I attempting to do? Do I need to build some form of a hybrid for a particular event? Or do I just want to, like, I don't know, Presence of Mind, Arcane Power, Pyroblast, Kel'Thuzad, Vanilla WoW for over 9,000 damage? That was very fun.
We should say thanks to Thad for what he did.
It's
now
the derivation of like literally playing on Wolfram Alpha, asking like 100,000 different questions. I can believe the man did it. I won't get into a whole bunch of other reasons, but I could actually see that a man. I'm gonna say he's essentially the Tom Brady of the physics community, in my opinion. And again, we're gonna need some more and more. And again, just the way the universe works, it's like, all right, I'm out for a run. Let me do my standard thing. Oh, look, here's this physicist I followed. Let me click on this. I'm like, oh, if half the stuff this dude is saying is accurate, this is revolutionary. And again, like I've seen other things before, and it's like, okay, that's good. What would you want? You want observational proof. The very next day, they unsealed the muon G2 results. I'm at work, I'm listening, and it's like, this is our Mars rover moment. 10 years, thousands of people, hours and stuff invested. And they're going through, and you have the new results. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Text that. I just tweet that. I'm like, does this help your model? Yes. Get home. I go back to the video that premiered the day before when I was listening to all I was on the run, looking like you on G2. I'm like, all right, what are the results from Fermilab? I'm like, the prediction nailed it. That's very interesting. I delved more. So, sorry. Quick shout out to that. I'll add the linky.
I'm not sure if you were able to follow my reasoning there about fixing a point in the center and how if we rotate it, we could see how it might make a sphere. But if it was going super fast, you could see how it would fold into itself and generate the HFA complement. I'm not sure if because it's not perfectly symmetrical.
Well, I mean, that's
symmetrical
just
about the origin.
Math is basically just reflections and folding and stuff.
But did you understand how we went from the dual measurement limit to the non-dual measurement limit through fixing a point in the center and keeping a tremendous amount of vibrational motion in place? So you think of it as going infinitely fast in place, and then you fix one point, but it still has all that motion. So it's going in all the different directions. What is the resulting shape that is traced out from that motion that now has one fixed point?
Oh, the HFA complement.
It depends on how fast it's going. If it's going slow, it's going to be a sphere. If it's going fast enough, it's going to fold into itself due to its fundamental asymmetry, which is illustrated in the purple spheres. Okay? So that's dividing by 0. Because a point is 0-dimensional.
Are you talking about the purple spheres on the quantum periodic table here?
Yes. I've been referring to the QMPT the whole time.
Okay. No. I'm... Now, are you talking about it as the actual QMPT, or basically it would fold in along that form of a symmetry?
Think of it as the QMPT is going infinitely fast. So even though it has a geometry, it's moving and it's going infinitely fast, but it's not moving around in space. It's just vibrating. Pure vibrational potential. But it still has that geometry, okay?
So again, it's just probably me as a crazy person, but when I just look at that and I'm thinking about folding, it kind of sounds like you're trying to divide it, and that coincidentally kind of looks like it. No, but I'm just saying, if that were to happen, it kind of looks like a multiplication sign, and I just divide it in half, so that makes intuitive sense to me, even if that's not exactly what's happening.
Are you talking about the relative shapes of the purple sections of the
I,
QMPT?
I'm
How they're
looking.
like
I'm
L's?
looking if I was to draw a line the other way through them to line
But you
up
are
the.
referencing the purple ones, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So if you drop perpendiculars everywhere, you get a basic quadrilateral lattice. See what I'm referencing?
I heard lattice. What? Say that one more time.
Like if you drop perpendiculars relative to those shapes, you get a crystal lattice. So that's another example of
We're
how to
at
build it.
fractals.
Yeah,
All right.
because the final level represents the third dimension, represents solids, represents all three dimensions are out of potential. So there's always a complementarity. Because the measurement limit is the limit, this never changes. So once again, we have infinitely fast going object, and we're going to start doing stuff to it. We're going to fix one point in the center. And then we're going to ask, well, it still has all this vibrational motion, but we fixed a point. What do we have? I mean, we already know the answer from, at least in some sense, from math, it's just R equals a constant because that shape is anti-symmetrical.
This is far beyond what I was planning on doing. We're literally
I had
doing this.
no idea that this
It's
was gonna. I mean, I didn't know
no,
any of this
no,
stuff
no.
before we
I'm
started
just
either.
like, all
So this
right,
is how it goes.
here's a model. If there was a fluid, if there were two fluids in here, they never actually touch. Bada boom, bada bing. Space is really large.
There's no
This would
fucking
explain. This would
fluids yet.
explain inflation, the CMB, primordial gravitational waves. Just because if there is a superfluid, if there's rotation in whatever object it is, I mean, just naturally, it's going to be vortices that come up. I'm like, the more and more I think about it, I'm like, okay, so if you get a vortice, I'm like, okay, if there's different things, you got protons, you got some neutrons, okay, it's naturally going to come together, you're going to form galaxies, and then based upon vortices, and they seem to always be splitting into like smaller thirds and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, if you got central mass in the center, now it could eddy out, and maybe you're going to start to get some stars, you'll get some planets and the scales and everything. And I'm like, now that I actually think about it, this was probably the right way to do it, because if you're actually going to try to explain it, it's, well, I guess you got to start from the metaphysical and define exactly what the heck we're doing. I was just going to make some observations and then say we're going to need some math, but I'll take this.
How about the boundary of the physical and metaphysical? How about we just make that compromise?
Oh, I don't know. Is that
Because
our measurement
either
limit?
way seems to cause problems. Like if you go too far into metaphysical, it stops being practical, and then if you go too far into the physical, it becomes too, I don't know, cynical or something. There were some
Works for me.
questions in the chat I wanted to
Yeah,
get to, if that's okay.
go on.
Parmenides asked if my thing is an entheogenic doctrine. Like, I don't want the thing to be centered, like, I don't know, people thinking that it's like some sort of druggy doctrine. But the mushroom is a wonderful way to demonstrate this principle, as is the apple. So it's just as much an applogenic doctrine as it is an entheogenic doctrine. How deeply have I studied fungi? Not too deeply, in the sense of taking a bunch of drugs.
It seems to come up a lot in history. I mean, I only smoked half a stalk, but I'm pretty sure it didn't really do anything with my other folks. And I think it was mostly opium.
Mark Smith says perfectly adjusting to your neighborhood entropy. To your neighborhood is entropy, Jen? No. Entropy is the connection between this and entropy is that if we can map this to macro states in a continuous manner, coherent manner, I guess, then we should be able to predict the maximum entropy state based on the geometry of the system. And this thing is the Microstate Simulator. And the idea is that, well, it'll actually be accurate if you can line your system up with these types of, I don't want to say vibrators, but what can you say? You'll be able to, generate microstates because of the informational. I'm not sure exactly how to word it, but I don't think it's clear. But basically the fact that
if we're dealing with something that ends up however we get there, which it looks like we're actually on our way to trying to figure out a workable model, which is actually highly stimulating. But all I know is I'm like, as soon as you get balance there, if you get balance, I thought that was the whole thing when I keep on hearing about superstring perturbation theory. It's like, you have a model, dip your finger or any type of perturbation, then the model goes. And it looks like it goes on and on, my friends.
Well, sure, if you're starting from infinite motion, I mean, think about it. What's the problem with the models now is we can't account for the subtler properties of light. So we need a model that, okay, maybe something going infinitely fast, that's not intuitive. But it's not as counterintuitive as some other models. Do you know what I'm saying?
How about this for a moment? Because we're going to need a lot more of these streams, apparently, because this is fascinating. I need to go run. But how about if we think like an experimentalist? Let's take a page out of the book of Professor Brian Keating, Nick Fury, and or Mr. Rogers of the physics community. But all I'm saying is, is there a simple form, or at least something we have the technology now to do, to attempt to do this? Is it possible to do rotation? And I was thinking about this. I'm like, what happens if we were to pass light through, like a superfluid, while it's forming vortices? What happens? Like, what effects may we see, may we predict, and then what will we observe?
What's the speed of gravity?
Ooh.
Infinite.
Interesting.
It's a race between infinity and the speed of light. Everything interesting happens between infinity and the speed of light, and gravity is infinitely fast. So even though it's gravity that's infinitely fast, we're actually modeling light as infinitely fast, because who can really tell the difference? Wink.
I mean, is it? I mean, I thought when they did the model, I thought at LIGO we were detecting things from like billions of years ago. So,
we're detecting
then again, that
vibrations.
still might work. Okay.
Anything anything indirect is interpretational, and if we're just getting vibrations and interpreting distributions, well, we should be interpreting it in a way that conforms with what we already know works. And this thermodynamic decomposition works, doesn't it? I mean, thermodynamics, is it not more successful than quantum mechanics in some sense?
Well, it's basically the derivation for pretty much everything. Well, at least motion, things moving, and the generation of heat, which I was listening to some things the other day, and I still need to go through about a 2-hour video on it, but it really seems to explain a lot, but I keep putting it in a box. I'm like, no, I want to... I want to go through some of Professor Keating's papers, and because he had one on like rotation and galactic rotation and the flatness.
Well, what do you want to be asking? You should be thinking, Wolfram, if he is truly your guru, think of what he would be asking. What is the correspondence with what already exists with this idea? Do we have a model for infinite speed already? Hint!
That's a great idea. Thank you, Jen.
Well, what's the answer? If there is no friction, is every observation some type of friction? Sorry, erase what I just said. Is every observation some type of friction?
For us, yes. Or at least if we're using our equipment.
That's actually how quantum mechanics accidentally defined it. I'm allowed to take advantage of that fact, aren't I? Just the same as delta x. So if for all observations there exists friction, then a frictionless system is unobserved. And if an unobserved system also gives rise to all observations.
What if there is a minimal friction? A damping effect or
perfect. There you go. Minimal friction. Now you're thinking about it in the right way.
Oh.
Now, why is that important? Because there's still motion when there's no friction.
Because when we're working from infinity, when we're working from the limits, whatever seems to be the simplest. Oh, okay.
You gotta love photonics. Because it's so simple, but it's so complicated at the same time. It's like, ooh. And those jokes about mushrooms are hilarious.
I mean, there seems to be a lot in a lot of the old stories, and
that was in Spore Taste. Did you see that?
Oh, I see what you did there. Okay. All right. So we're going to need to wrap this up. We've been going for a little over an hour. Jen, this is fascinating. Let's see, were there any more questions here you wanted to get to?
I think everybody is probably as astounded as you are, because frankly, like, I don't think I've even thought of this fixing a point being dividing by zero thing until just now. So I should be thanking you. I guess that's stunned silence is the only appropriate response right now. But
You
actually,
just
I was
made me
amazed at how much you understood, frankly. So good job on that. And
when
yeah,
you say the wolf.
before we go, can you please give advice to people who are maybe interested but intimidated, don't think they're smart enough to learn it?
I'm gonna put something in the thing right now, just because this is important. If you want, because I had asked that, I'm like, that if I want to show somebody something, it's like, what do I show? And it's like, he told me the simplest universe. This was before he came back with a couple other ones, but just because he kind of goes through the theorizing, and so basically his YouTube channel, he has the simplest universe, probably followed by was it superfluid dynamics. Oh God, my mind only does so many things at once. All right, here we go. Bada boom, bada bing. I do like. Oh, and Jen, I'll toss a couple of your articles over there too. Just for an intuition, just because a lot of yours aren't necessarily that long, and they're very intuitive. So okay, in this one, Thad basically kind of goes through. This is one of his lectures from last year, and basically he went through kind of not necessarily the history, but how one would go about deriving it, and you can put this stuff into Wolfram Alpha. You may need some more particular equations, which is one of the reasons I got the little strategy guide as well. I think you can buy the book for like $10 if you want to just read it online. But yeah, it's an absolutely fascinating thing. Like I said, I noticed it. I'm like, that's kind of cool. The next day, some 10-year observational results came in. The model predicted it. I sit there and I'm like, no way. And part of my thought is, I'm like, all right. Basically, I just wanted to argue about politics and stuff like that and do the standard like S Lord kind of thing, but push back in the other way. I think one of my things was, very often when things would start to get out of balance, I'd be like, okay, even if I don't necessarily believe this, you got to be fair. Because I always hear it's like, well, they only call us out, or we only call us out. Why? Because that's how you assemble people around you. Oh, they're calling all those other folks. They're saying the words we like. But when you start saying words we like, it's like, okay, oh, you just said some words we didn't like. We didn't like that there. And I'm like, okay, I could have just picked a side, whatever, it doesn't matter what it is. And you just go full bore, and that's the algorithm generates it for you. I'm like, what if I use the algorithm to find something else? I'm like, all right, theories of everything. Dr. Eric Weinstein and Joe Rogan, twisters. What is this? What is going on here? So I will start on a quest to find the best theory of everything yet. And I literally went to sleep listening to like Jonathan and like some of the Wolfram physics lectures. I keep it on low on my noise canceling headphones and just kind of go to sleep. My algorithm was slowly seeding, and I like to think that had more to do with it than just dumb luck, which it probably also was. But all I know is we're here now. I'm seeing things that seem to geometrically explain quantum field theory. It has the numbers within the error bars and everything from what I can see here. I don't see it's wrong. And a lot of other smart people seem to be saying the same thing. Now, how can we more formalize and present in another way that other folks within the community and just humanity can actually look and be like, oh, what can we do with this? If it is possible to get literally replicators from Star Trek in like 50 years or so, again, a very optimal claim. But I sit back and I think, I'm like, if this is true, if this actually is true, if this was just the one thing, because we kind of skipped over the hard problem of turbulence for a number of years, I could see how this might happen. And if all of a sudden we can get that next step, it's like, dude, you go back like 100 years and stuff, I think they were still delivering ice and everything. I got an ice box and everything. It's like, you look at this, it's like you literally go on your communicator, you can order food, you punch in some numbers, you say some magic words. It's this is a beautiful thing. Like, in Jen, when you were talking about like the actual F8 complement, I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay, my stated goal has been to become the most powerful wizard on the internet. I'll just be honest about that. I'm like, okay, I'm sitting here with a tome of power, and if I were to actually get one of these things, I'm holding an object. I'm like, this is sounding more and more like Dungeons and Dragons. I'm loving it.
Yeah, it's like there's nothing supernatural, but people don't understand what's natural, and if they did, they'd realize, video games are superfluous in some sense. But yeah, thanks so much for the explanation, and I'm looking forward to the next time we can talk. And thanks everyone for tuning in. Have you put my article in the chat for people if they want to check it out?
I am clicking on all the stuff. Okay, this was the current article that we had. I think we both need link trees to link
The second to last one is not a full exposition of the new mathematical system, but it's just to get a feel for it. But yeah, mathematical, physical thingy will be something along those lines.
This is fascinating. I think I'm going to have to do the. Okay, here's I think was it part. This is Stad's newest book. He's coming out with an updated version next month or so, but it's in from either on Kindle or paperback. You can use their free e-reader. It's from like $10 to $30, depending on which physical copy. And it's a way to help that and everything. You actually get a physical thing, but yeah, it's basically got his derivations for quantum field theory, and it's very amazing just because he did this literally grinding on Wolfram Alpha. Actually, it kind of reminds me of I was a server first level 80 Death Knight in World of Warcraft when that came out. All I literally did to prepare is I played the beta for like the Death Knight early levels until you get to whatever the Outland. I played on my warrior for like a couple levels and the thing, and I just drank a lot of Diet Pepsi and I ground it out. I was server first level 80 Death Knight. Ooh, apparently that means something now. But this is the thing. He did that with Wolfram Alpha and physics. And somebody had noticed that he had read another book, Einstein's Intuition. And basically they had noticed a conversation online. They sent him an email directing him to it. And somebody had written out an equation that had basically been able to predict the fine structure constant to about 7 significant digits. It's very interesting. So all he did was he cleaned up the algebra a little bit, and he put it into Wolfram Alpha. So actually, we can just do this right now. Why? Because it's the freaking internet, and we can. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go into, where is it? Hyperbolic vortex equation. All right. So we're just gonna do this. Bada boom, bada bing. Chrome tab. All right. So all it is, as we can see right here, this is the hyperbolic vortex equation. Comes out over 1 over x plus x cubed, which just so happens to be the standard equation for a parabola. And all he did was divides the x cubed by 2 pi, which is a circle. And he sets it equal to I raised to the I, which is the square root of -1 in the imaginary, let's say, plane dimension, however you want to think about it. And then it just has pi divided by 2. Circle going the other way. And it came out to be about the Planck mass when you square the first answer. However, it was a little bit off. So he's like, what's it off by? So he just did minus y. That y happened to be this, negative 2.1764 to the -8. It just so happens to be the Planck mass. How very interesting. So you go down here to the first answer. We click on the first answer. Oh geez, I'm dropping tomes of power. We just take that answer and we square it. Anybody that wants to bring up another tab, come out to be 0.00729735. Well, it looks like the fine structure constant. It's very interesting. Well, we'll just do this. Because we're on Wolfram Alpha. Literally like the AOL of solving the universe. Oh, look. 0.729735. That looks awfully familiar. That looks awfully familiar. I'm just saying that if I can put these numbers in, and there happen to be derivations, and again, maybe it's still a big math trick. If this is a math trick, this is the best math trick I've ever seen, because to try to link all this up, I think it's easier to actually try to solve for a fundamental theory or try to find a fundamental theory of physics.
It's a little bit like paradoxes, because it's like, well, look at all this cool shit in math. How the heck did we get away with it? By thinking about it, gives you a deeper insight into some other math adjacent process. So that's
this is why I like Duvid. No, because there's multiple truths. That's kind of how I think about it. When I see something go on, I just do what I call asymptotic analysis. I'm like, all right, what would be the most extreme? What would be the extreme in the other direction? It's probably somewhere in the middle.
Yes, and with the right coordinate system, you can actually be right when you make assertions like that.
Well, exactly. And I love the sheer fact that it's hyperbolic. It describes me very well. I'm just saying, this has been my life. I'm sitting here, I'm like, is this real life? Is this just fantasy? Are we just playing the game?
Fluid. Super fluid. Could there be a sexier term?
Hyperfluid.
Super fluid.
I'm basing this off of levels of hedgehogs and chaos energy, which also happens to be 7 and another. Okay, we're gonna end this now, or else this will never end.
We gotta go. Bye.
All I'm saying is what rolls downstairs over and bears rolls over your neighbor's dog. What's great for a snack and fits on your back? It's log. Oh, it's not the longer one. All right, that's all I got. Peace out, everybody. We'll see ya.
Have you guys checked out the Memes of Destruction's channel? He's an interesting dude. I like him.